Shock in Moscow. A GRU general, deputy head of the Russian negotiation team in Abu Dhabi, has been shot. Who started the hunt for Kremlin generals? The negotiations in Abu Dhabi exploded with sensational revelations. A ceasefire is already on the table. The second round is over. Details of the secret discussions have been revealed. Bhutan confirms the shocking news. Next stop, America. Zelenskyy has announced new rounds of negotiations. Ukraine is setting tough conditions. Russia is in the digital Stone Age. Starlink has been cut off for the occupiers. Chaos reigns at the front. Communications are down. Assaults have failed. Command and control of the troops is paralyzed. The Kremlin is losing control. The front has collapsed. Gasoline is more expensive than in America, and the Russian economy is falling into a debt pit. And this is only the beginning of total Armageddon in Russia. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I am Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. The negotiations in Abu Dhabi have concluded. The media have already spread information that the groups were discussing how to implement a ceasefire, but something unexpected happened. In Moscow, the deputy head of the Russian negotiation group, GRU chief Kostyukov, was shot. An assassination attempt was made on a lieutenant general of the Ministry of Defense. The occupying officer was shot in the northwest of Moscow. He has been hospitalized. This is an attempt to eliminate Vladimir Alexeyev. Russian sources report that it all happened when the lieutenant general was leaving his home. Several shots were fired, as a result of which the Russian general was seriously wounded. According to the Russian Investigative Committee, an unknown person opened fire on the 24th floor of the building.
The unidentified perpetrator discharged several rounds from a firearm at the man, and then quickly fled from the scene of the crime.
Vladimir Alexeyev holds the position of First Deputy Chief of the Main Intelligence Directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. In 2023, during Prigozhin's mutiny, Alexeyev delivered a video address to the Wagner PMC fighters, in which he urged them to cease further actions and participated in negotiations with the head of the PMC, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Breaking news. New details about the second round of negotiations in Abu Dhabi. The negotiators discussed how to implement the ceasefire. In the final communique of the meeting, which was released by the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, it was stated that the discussions were constructive and focused on ways to create efforts to achieve lasting peace. The delegations agreed on a prisoner exchange. Over the course of
2 days, the delegations held extensive discussions on unresolved issues, including methods for ensuring a ceasefire and monitoring the cessation of military activities.
The delegations also agreed to inform their senior leadership and to continue negotiations in the coming weeks. The head of the Ukrainian presidential office, Budanov, described the negotiations as constructive and thanked the US and the UAE for their mediation.
The negotiations were indeed constructive. I am grateful to the US and the UAE for their excellent organization and mediation.
In turn, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that the Ukrainian negotiating delegation had already reported to him on the results of the meeting.
From what can already be said, further meetings are planned in the near future, most likely in America.
According to him, Ukraine is ready for any working formats that will help bring peace closer and make it reliable and lasting. At the same time, Russia must be deprived of any appetite to continue fighting, the president stated.
It is important that this war ends in such a way that Russia receives no reward for its aggression. This is one of the key principles that restores and guarantees real security. I thank all our partners who support us in this.
Let us recall that the second round of trilateral consultations between Ukraine, the US, and Russia took place on February 4th and 5th in the United Arab Emirates. The parties worked in the format of working groups for 5 hours a day. No significant progress was made on the most difficult issue, control over the territories of Donbas. The main achievement of the meeting was the agreement to exchange 314 people, 157 from each side. Trump's team also confirmed the results of the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in Abu Dhabi. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff called the discussions constructive and emphasized that the parties are focused on creating conditions for a lasting peace.
In the course of 2 days, the delegations held extensive discussions on unresolved issues, including methods for ensuring a ceasefire and monitoring the cessation of military activity.
It is also interesting to note that a direct line of communication has been established between the military commands of the United States and Russia. It will be headed by General Alexis Grinkowicz, the commander of the U.S. European Command.
This communication channel had been suspended prior to the start of this conflict, and it is crucial for achieving and maintaining peace. And
now Russia has issued a new ultimatum. Through its media, the Russian Federation is promoting a new demand that all countries recognize Donbas as Russian territory. Zelenskyy rejects this. Additionally, Peskov stated that Moscow will continue the war until Ukraine makes the necessary decisions. Zelenskyy reminded that Russia is not demanding recognition of Donbas as Russian, but that won't give them anything, even if some leaders of other countries take such a chance.
First of all, not everyone will, as my Polish colleague said. And secondly, Ukraine has a president of Ukraine who signs the documents. Thank God. And not other leaders signing important documents on behalf of Ukraine.
Zelenskyy added that, considering this, Ukrainian territories remain Ukrainian, even though their current status is temporarily occupied. Notably, Russian media also report that Kyiv allegedly stated security guarantees for Odesa during trilateral negotiations between Ukraine, Russia, and the US in Abu Dhabi. This was reported by the Russian outlet Media Tasa, citing an unnamed source familiar with the negotiations in the UAE. The interlocutor of the Russian media also added that this issue is very important for the Ukrainian side. The point is that the Russian army will not attack the city.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
And here's another sensational piece of news. The occupiers have gone back to the age of mammoths using internet terminals employed by the Russians. Starlink has been blocked, but Ukrainian devices included in the whitelist have resumed operation, according to Ukraine's Minister of Defense Fedorov. Russian war correspondents are already howling about disruptions, and the occupiers are asking volunteers for radios through Z channels. Moreover, due to the lack of Starlink, the number of assaults by the Russians has sharply decreased, and there have even been reports of them shooting at each other.
The shutdown of Starlink terminals for the Russian occupiers has led to significant disruptions in their logistics and a decrease in the intensity of combat operations at the front. In
particular, the following consequences have been recorded. A decrease in assault activity. It has become harder for the occupiers to coordinate infantry and equipment in real time. Problems with UAVs. The number of drone deployments of various types has noticeably decreased since their operation often depends on a stable connection. Loss of operational efficiency. The overall command system of enemy forces is malfunctioning due to a shortage of reliable data transmission channels. Atesh sources report the same situation everywhere. Troop command is effectively paralyzed. In
the occupiers' units, there is an almost complete failure of Starlink terminals. Russian signal operators are in despair. Attempts to deploy backup communication channels are failing, one after another. Standard electronic warfare equipment regularly jams even their own radios. Without stable communications at the front line, chaos begins. The lack of coordination is already leading to heavy losses, and not just from the enemy.
Ukraine is strengthening on all fronts. EU ambassadors have come close to an agreement on a €90 billion loan to finance Ukraine's defense against Russia. Meanwhile, near Kupiansk, the Russians are surrounded by a brilliant operation of the Ukrainian armed forces. Here are the details.
The European Union has agreed on a €90 billion loan to support Ukraine's general budget and its defense needs.
Today we approved the decision to provide Ukraine with €90 billion for the next 2 years. As a matter of urgency, we will provide a loan secured by the European Union budget. This will allow Ukraine to meet its urgent financial needs, and they will only have to repay this loan after Russia pays reparations.
All of this, of course, is an undisguised plan to carry out foreign military intervention. That's what it should be called. For us, this is absolutely unacceptable. Russia will seek to resolve this issue by military or political means.
The battle for Kupiansk has, without exaggeration, become the most successful operation by Ukrainian forces in the past year. The clearing of the city is ongoing. Up to 50 occupiers are surrounded. In
Kupiansk itself, the operation continues. The enclave is clearly defined, its boundaries are understood. It is completely surrounded by our troops. A systematic clearing of the Russian occupiers in this part of the city is ongoing. The rest of Kupiansk is under our full control. There is no sound of shelling there. The situation in the city is calm and under control, thanks to the efforts of Ukraine's defense forces.
And all this is happening against the backdrop of Putin and his generals claiming dozens of times about the so-called heroic liberation of Kupiansk.
The Zapad group has liberated the city of Kupiansk and continues to destroy the formations of the Ukrainian armed forces surrounded on the left bank of the Oskil River.
In the Kupiansk direction, assault units of the 68th Motorized Rifle Division of the 6th Army have completed the liberation of the city of Kupiansk.
So, that's it. It's completely finished.
That's correct. The city is under our control, and isolated small scattered enemy groups are being eliminated.
Besides everything else, let me remind you that on the left bank of the river, an enemy group numbering 15 battalions has been blocked.
In the Kharkiv region, as is known, has come under our control. The city of Kupiansk came under our control several weeks ago. Our troops are controlling the city there, but are not yet advancing westward.
Group troops west. They have taken the strategically important city of Kupiansk, which the enemy is unsuccessfully trying to reclaim.
Putin has nothing to boast about on the battlefield so far, so he has to continue negotiations in Abu Dhabi and make some concessions. Or at least pretend to.
The agreement on the territories is still being discussed. The work on security guarantees is almost complete. The prosperity agreement is nearing completion. I think that the people of Ukraine are now full of hope that we will soon reach the right agreement.
The fact that Russia has moved on to discussing technical details is already an important sign that Putin is looking at the peace process differently, not in terms of its effectiveness, but in terms of dragging it out. Because he has already realized that the presence of people like Medinsky in the peace process, at the very least, signals to the Americans that Putin has no serious intentions. They understand perfectly well that a clown cannot resolve issues of war and peace. So then he sends serious people there, like generals, so to speak.
And if you add in the news about the possible transfer of Tomahawks and the disconnection of Starlinks for the Russians, you can conclude that despite the abnormal frosts and attacks on the energy sector, Ukraine is literally crushing the Russians on all fronts.
The occupiers just can't catch a break, no matter what. Russian gasoline is now more expensive than American, and in the spring, the country's gas stations are expected to see another surge in fuel prices. In this way, Russians are paying for the war. The war of Russia against Ukraine, and they will keep paying more and more.
Gasoline in Russia is now a luxury, not just fuel for getting around. Putin has played himself into a corner, and now petroleum products in Russia are already more expensive than in the US. In 2026, Russians have to pay more per liter of diesel or 95 octane than Americans do.
Well, what do I want to say to drivers? Take advantage of the moment. Every time, fill your tank to the brim because next time you'll be paying a different price.
So, even today, a liter of fuel in the United States costs almost 5 rubles less than in Russia, cheaper than in the aggressor country. And this gap is relentlessly growing. And that's all because following global oil prices, fuel prices in the US and other countries are going down. But in Russia, the situation is completely the opposite. Gasoline only keeps steadily getting more expensive. Moreover, the fuel price in Russia is even outpacing the rate of inflation.
Russian oil pricing is very unique. Oil prices go down, gasoline goes up. Oil prices go up, gasoline also goes up.
Kremlin greed is to blame for all of this. The Russian government continues to base its calculations on unrealistic figures. Because of sanctions and as a result falling export revenues, Russian companies are left without windfall profits.
The Russian oil price will hover around $40. This means that instead of being a breadwinner, everything is actually turning out the opposite, and a big hole is forming. In other words, there is a shortfall in oil tax revenues for the budget, and the list of breadwinners has shrunk dramatically.
But the number of freeloaders at the Kremlin is only growing. Russian oil traders are covering their losses with Putin's permission, at the expense of Russian taxpayers' pockets. In
the past year, oil companies received 900 billion rubles from the budget. Almost $1 trillion. That's how much was given from the Russian budget to oil companies so they wouldn't raise gasoline prices. But they raised them anyway. And
analysts unanimously say that things will only get worse from here. The forecasts for Russia's economy in the coming years are grim. The average annual price of Brent oil in 2026 will only continue to fall. In retaliation, Russian oil traders will keep driving up prices at gas stations, creating an artificial shortage.
In other words, oil companies will try to make up on the domestic market what they didn't get abroad, explaining it away with various difficulties like Ukrainian strikes on refineries. We can see that they're cunning like a sly child who nurses from two mothers at once. They received $1 trillion from the budget through the damper and still raised prices. According to Rostat, gasoline went up by 11% in 2025. So I think they certainly won't miss their chance. That's why we should expect another spike in gasoline prices, which they'll explain away as a seasonal factor. But prices go up seasonally and then they don't go down when the season ends. So in the end, all of this is about everyone reaching into Russians' pockets and wallets.
It would seem this is elementary. Putin and his buddies, the oil oligarchs, have nowhere to sell their oil on the world market, so it's the perfect time to focus on the domestic market. But not so fast.
Of course, it could be refined and used within the country so that citizens would have more gasoline and gas prices would go down. But that's not as profitable from a business perspective.
As strange as it may sound, the more expensive and less accessible gasoline is in Russia, the better it is for the Kremlin.
The government is doing everything it can to drive prices up to make them rise faster, while at the same time pretending to fight against rising prices. That's the picture.
If things keep going this way, economists are sure that in just a year or two, most Russians will switch from cars back to horse-drawn carts.
So they let things get out of hand, and now they're bringing back a normal model like North Korea. North Korea was copied from the Soviet Union, so now the Russian Federation will copy North Korea. Makes sense. What's so surprising?
The Kremlin has come up short by billions. Russia's revenues from oil and gas have plummeted to a minimum. Russia's income from selling oil and gas in January was almost half of what it was during the same period last year, and have reached their lowest level since July 2022. See all the details.
Putin's Russia is on the brink of collapse, getting closer and closer to crisis. The Kremlin has come up short by billions. A key sector of Russia's economy has collapsed.
These are all the results of their work. In
January 2026, oil and gas revenues to the Russian budget dropped by 50% at once, compared to the same period last year, and have reached their lowest level since July 2020.
There is probably not much new that I can add to the conversation here.
According to official statistics, oil and gas revenues in January amounted to about $5 billion. In December, this figure was noticeably higher. One of the reasons for the decline is the drop in global oil prices.
The average price of Russian oil in November was $44 per barrel. The average price in December was $39 per barrel. Throughout January, we often heard reports that Russia is trying to stay on the global market by offering discounts on its oil. But what do these discounts lead to? They lead to Russian oil becoming cheaper and cheaper. If we compare Russian Urals with the world's traditional Brent crude, the discount is about $9.
Russia has set a record discount on Urals crude oil to stimulate demand among Indian oil refineries. If current prices for Russian oil and the ruble exchange rate remain the same, the budget will miss out on about 3 trillion rubles in oil and gas revenues, according to the Financial Times.
As a result, the real price of Russian oil is $40 per barrel. Basically, $20 are not being collected from each barrel of oil, which seriously affects the expected revenue from the oil and gas sector. Then this whole game with discounts that Russia is playing, telling everyone, see, we're offering discounts, people are buying from us. But from an economic standpoint, when you play with discounts, it's not a long-term strategy. In the long run, you can't keep offering discounts because you'll end up bankrupt.
Oil and gas revenues provide more than 20% of all income to Russia's federal budget and remain the most important source of funding for the war with Ukraine. Oil plays a key role. It accounts for 85% of the revenues, while gas only brings in 15%.
Negotiations are underway with China regarding the construction of Power of Siberia 2, the second branch of the gas pipeline. And China is setting conditions. It buys gas from Russia at domestic Russian prices. These are subsidized, meaning they are below cost. And accordingly, China wants to buy Russian gas below cost as well. As a result, in order to make any profit, Gazprom will try to make up for it at the expense of the Russian population. But so far, for political reasons, this idea has not been approved. But the situation is only getting worse.
Another source of revenue for the Russian budget is gold. It was precisely the sale of gold that increased the value of Russia's reserves. However, An 18% drop in the price of gold last week has called the viability of this resource into question. Moreover, over the past 4 years, the dictator has already managed to sell off 71% of the country's national wealth fund gold.
Everyone is offloading gold, and this is also drawing the attention of financial analysts. Because, there's a joke in the financial world that gold is the last barricade. In other words, if you're selling gold, that's it. There's nothing left behind it. That means your country is facing severe economic shocks ahead, and Russia is now at the stage of, yes, we're selling gold, our gold reserves are shrinking. When will it run out? Will it be this year or will it last until next year? We'll see if Russia can hold out.
Traditional sources of income are dwindling, but expenses aren't going anywhere.
The year 2025. The year begins with a planned budget deficit of 1.2 trillion rubles. The year ends, according to official data, I emphasize 5.6 trillion. So the deficit has grown almost fivefold compared to what was planned. The same situation is happening now. There are no real prospects for economic improvement in sight. Russia continues to invest in the war against Ukraine, but at the same time is neglecting its domestic economy. The resources that should have been allocated to maintaining the current existing, more precisely the existing infrastructure, are not being allocated. According to
experts' forecasts, the deficit in the Russian budget by the end of 2026 could be 3 times higher than planned, and the money reserves may run out within a year. What do you think about the latest events? We look forward to your comments. There's more to come. Stay informed about the main news and don't forget to like. Wishing you peaceful skies above.